Welcome back to the Seven Figure Club podcast, everyone. I am your host, Jennifer Longmore, and today we have a very, very special guest who, once I introduce her, you'll understand why she's here. So I want to introduce you to Shasta Townsend. She has taken 20 years of corporate marketing and branding success along with her 8-figure business acumen, and goes past all of the stuff, all of the fluffiness, and gets deep into what is our genius and then helps us to translate that. We had a great conversation privately last week, and it's already clear anyways, but once you see her quiz funnel, once you see some of the things that she's been posting with this expansion of this division of her company, you'll understand. But she's really just trying to help all of us that are at a certain level get to that iconic level of, I guess, business success. Is that what you would call it, Shasta?
Mm-hmm. And personal satisfaction too.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah,
that's a big one. So she has a website called BeTheMustHave.com, which I think is pretty amazing. She started her career early in marketing and communications for a massive brewery in Canada and Bombardier Aerospace. So she has now created her own lucrative defector brands in the health and wellness, luxury services and travel, personal development, and real estate space. So she's been in a lot of different industries and has trained with industry giants like Sally Hogshead and Ryan Levecque. She brings an unadulterated ability to genius and must-have potential in you and your business, which she credits to her Cree-Metis heritage and seeing things in a sacred matrix rather than a derivative formula. She has a background in human potential, spirituality, sensuality, and also means she has the tools and know-how to help her clients break through the shame that's blocking them from confidently sharing insights and opinions. How much do you think shame holds us back in business?
Oh, it's the number one thing that's holding us back. I mean, it's so interesting because whether we talk about money, and our money stories as you do so adeptly, or we talk about scaling, or we talk about branding, or we talk about being seen or being on a podcast, and however we call them shadows, the shadow shows up, whether it's self-sabotage, martyrdom, overworking, underworking. It's all rooted basically in shame or guilt, which are essentially the two, guardians at the gates of our success. And shame is always about the idea that I am wrong. There's something wrong about me. Guilt is I'm doing something wrong, right? And shame, it's so, I think, actually unconscious and deeply rooted. I mean, I could talk about this for hours because it's one of the actual fundamental, it's interesting because my business, we don't lead with this, but it's actually the deepest work we do with people. And I have a background in human sexuality and I'm a best-selling author in female sexuality. And it's like, there's these unconscious stories about who we're allowed to be, what we're allowed to say, and then they'll manifest in different ways in our life. When it comes to our business, especially as women, when we have a certain level of success, it means that you've broken through certain levels. You've broken through maybe ancestral stories, money stories. But then we start to get into, you've seen this, in all the amazing people you've worked with, is like, well, there's something underneath this. So anytime someone comes to me and they say, I feel like there's more and I don't know what it is, or I feel like I really, really am now at a point in my life where I've checked a lot of the boxes, but there's still something that I'm not doing or being or having or saying. When we dive actually deep into it, it's always about shame. And shame is almost always, sexual shame really, and all the shame's root out of that. And we live in such a repressive culture around that. So even though sex and sexuality is used all the time to market things, the truth is, especially for female business owners, the disconnection between sexuality and shamelessness, right, is massive. And it doesn't mean you have to lead with your ass shots on Instagram, right? It really just means like, what is the voice, so that everyone that's watching and listening to this, like, what's the voice in my head that says I can't say that? And for me, for a really long time, just to give an example, as I spent my formative development professional career in very high level corporate environments, and you were not, and very masculine environments. And I was very young and I had a lot of success really quickly. And I was usually the only woman in the room. And I had a voice in my head of like, you always have to be professional, which in my mind meant, you know, don't say certain things, go along with certain things, even though I was always a bit of a wild card. And even when I started my own business, and even today, I still notice it every so often, the voice will come up that's like, well, that's not professional. And it's like this dowdy, repressive, you know, like, I don't even know, like school marm voice. And I go, well, what is she really saying? You know, and she's saying, don't be seen, don't put yourself out there because there's some fundamental flaw that you have, or you don't want people to reject you. And everyone, you know, has this voice to some degree. They come up in different ways. And so I always go, well, what's it really about? You know, what's it really about? And it's always a voice of shame. And what we do, you know, in our work, whether it's building brands or marketing funnels or quiz funnels, it's very interesting because it's like, well, how do these all relate together? Well, our business is called Be the Must Have. And in order to be the must have, you actually have to have an opinion. You actually have to take a stand, right? You actually have to be seen. And in many ways, you have to not be, for me, it's the professional voice, you know, whatever your thing is. And if we look at icons and iconic brands and businesses, which, you know, I would suspect that a lot of women in your world, that's actually what they want. Like you get to a point where you have a certain level of financial success. Now it's like, well, I actually want to really own my shit and really put stuff out there. And that's being an icon. And that's where you have to take a stand. You have to have a voice. You have to, and not just be a differentiator to be a differentiator because you're trying to get someone's attention, but to really go deep inside yourself and be like, what do I actually believe? What do I actually stand for? What is the stuff underneath all the programming, whether it's familial, you know, church, religious, corporate, gender, and be like, what do I really, really stand for? And what, for me, for example, and then I'll turn it back over to you, it's a long answer, but it's such a great question. You know, in my world, what was really interesting is I was always like, so I had a very successful corporate career. And when I came to a point, both in my corporate career and then in the businesses that I created after, is when I really owned the truth that I'm kind of a mouthy bitch. Like I actually have a lot to say, you know, like I'm not really that girl. I'm not really the sit in the corner and don't say anything. And I never that professional, you know, it didn't work for me. And it was like wearing a mask. And the funny thing is as soon as I really consciously liberated that and did it again and again, everything took off. And I had to be willing to sort of be shamelessly opinionated. You know, I do things with some, I try to do them with, and have always tried to do them with some level of sophistication, but I was like, people hired me. I mean, my boss, even when I worked at Molson and Bombardier Aerospace, like these are very conservative companies. They would always turn to me. I was only 20 something. What do you have a 20 something on your management board? This is crazy. And they would say, you know, what do you think about this? And I would always have this kind of defector opinion, not to be a defector. And I realized, oh, that's my role, you know, and that this is what I am. I actually am, in our icon quiz, I'm a myth maker. I see things differently. I create new maps in the world. And so if you're listening to this, think about for yourself, you know, what is the voice that I have internally that's telling me how I should show up in my business, or how I should show up in my love life, or how I should show up on social media. And if you dug underneath that, it's always about shame. And then if you dug even deeper, you know, what's really the truth about all of that? And it's so interesting because as soon as we liberate that, and it feels so counterintuitive. I mean, for me, I thought, oh my God, everyone's going to hate me. I'm going to get fired. My clients are going to fire me. Like, you know, I have to be a professional. And no, they don't want that. They want, I get hired basically for my opinion, right? I get hired, and so do you actually, and probably everybody listening here. Like, you think you're selling a product or service, and of course you are, but people are buying from you specifically because they want your insight, they want your opinion, they want how you see it, and they want you to be you. And so our willingness to do that as women to shamelessly do that is actually, it's to me, it's the absolute, requirement and next step. And yet very few people talk about it. So it's the powerful equation between shame and really, really being seen, and then really, really having a magnetic business.
Mm-hmm. I love that you shared that. And yes, I hear you on that. I used to get told by all of my colleagues, because I always called stuff out. I could see it right away. And I'd be like, this is it. Because for those of you that don't know, I'm a 6-2 generator, which means that my standard of care is quite high. My level of integrity and my expectations and standards are quite high. I think realistic. Most people don't when they don't have that as their design. But the point is that I remember working in forensics, and yes, the clients were often on a hot mess express, but my colleagues and management were a gazillion times worse. And I could write a book just on the behind the scenes craziness, like full on mental health craziness and criminal activity of a lot of these people that I worked with. And so they would do things like, they hired this woman that was, she was currently going through court proceedings on federal drug smuggling charges. And they decided to hire her in an organization that required you to go to court and be a reliable witness, and then when she got convicted and called me collect from the jail that I had put one of our clients in, was in her cell.
Oh shit.
This is an example, right? Point is, when this manager brought it to our team meeting, she's like, I'm thinking of hiring this person. I'm like, am I the only sober person in this room? And I was, I don't know, 22 years old at the time, right? But all my colleagues, so I would call it out professionally, right? But it wasn't even good to call that stuff out. Point is, people would say to me after these meetings, after a gazillion of these scenarios, oh, you always say what the rest of us are thinking. Well, why don't you rise up and say it too? Like, I'm the one taking the heat for this. And I'm not saying anything that isn't, there's nothing groundbreaking about don't hire someone that's about to get convicted for federal drug smuggling charges. And she served 7 years in jail, right? Like, what is happening? Point is, back to 2020, I think I'd already, and you might relate to this, Shasta, like, I feel like once you get to a certain age in your life and stage in your life, your ability to censor yourself becomes less and less. Like, you weirdly care far less about things that used to matter way more to you than you thought, or get bent out of shape or whatever. And then other things that you didn't really care so much about before, you're like, right? So I wouldn't say I was swearing a lot, but I certainly had a harder time putting a muzzle on myself leading up to 2020. And I would see how people would respond to other people that were dropping like an arsenal of F-bombs, and think, I can see that. Because to your point, we're conditioned to be professional, and there's all these connotations with what it means. And then 2020 came, and it was all I could do to bite my tongue. Like, it wasn't like I was trying to make statements. They just were forced. It was almost like my guides would sit me down and put their hands on my shoulders, and they wouldn't let me move until I said what needed to be said, right? About whatever the nonsense was, or even just getting people to question things differently and like use their critical thinking. Point is that I got to a point where I was like, I don't care if I lose business. There are some things that need to be said. And everyone in my community now were with me at that time, meaning they came into my world because of me taking a stand, because of me speaking my truth, even if they didn't fully agree with me. And I have to say, for all of you listening that didn't fully agree with either how I was doing it or what I was saying, you still stuck around. That's emotional maturity, right? Like, you're able to allow people to hold different perspectives and not instantly amputate people. And but point is that my business went up, I think something like 180% or something like that in revenue from 2020 to 2021. And then it went up 256% from 2021 to 2022.
Yeah.
Not us focusing on the money. We were not focusing. In fact, and you get it at this stage, yeah, the business needs to be healthy, but you're really focused more on legacy, impact, making sure you're doing what you love. Does my business match my lifestyle? Is it a contribution to me? It's an asset. How can I keep expanding it? Whatever we're doing, right? But I share that because I certainly, in the beginning, it was a little crunchy for me. And I'm someone that's pretty direct and I speak my mind. But there is something about doing that publicly, right? Knowing that there's short-term and long-term cause and effect potentially from some things that you may share. And at the same time, I think the cost of being vanilla is far greater than the perceived cost of being a little bit spicy.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think the one, you see the results of that. But what's interesting is, you know, you weren't doing it to get a certain result or achievement. And it's a funny thing because someone had just messaged me on Facebook saying, I had responded to something she had sent, and I said, you know, the new paradigm, and those of us that are really standing in iconic energy, it's not just about achievement. It's not, I'm doing this in order to just get X amount of results. It's because your genius, like your true tone, your true voice, your true you, is flowing through the containers. In this case, let's say a podcast or an offer, and there's a certain ripple effect or an echo that comes back to you. But it's a very different way of thinking about it. So instead of saying, I have to say X in order to get Y, what I do with our clients is like, well, what is the really deepest, profound truth for you in your business? And we relate it to that. You know, it's like, what's relevant to these things? And then translate it in a way so that that truth of you is sending out a really specific tone. You get what I'm saying, and everyone here gets this, right? And so it's like striking a tone, and the tone is actually going to activate the people who don't even know they want to hear you, but they want to hear you, and they'll lean in, or even if they lean out, at least they're activated, at least something's moving in them. And it's a very different approach to all of the way, well, for me anyways, for 25 years of being in business and trying to be completely, you know, masculine, strategic. And I love strategy. Like, I literally build quiz funnels. I have to think about the 3D reality constantly. I'm cool with that. But what I see a lot is when people talk about, you know, being an influencer or creating, you know, finding their voice, is one, there's a lot of yelling going on, which that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about yelling. We're not talking about just being disruptive to be disruptive. We're not talking about being a jerk face or a troll, right? And at the same time, or as you just said, like being vanilla or formulaic. And there's so many coaches out there that are like, here's the 10 things you should say every day on social media. And maybe not. Maybe that's not to your true tone. That's maybe not to your taste. Maybe that really doesn't have any make sense to you at all. Like, I don't particularly like a lot of things, just doesn't resonate with me. Then the same way you have what's true for you. And when we can dive into that, it'll ring the right people, right? And it really does. And you're not, and it's a different way, and it really can challenge people, because, you know, I've been in marketing for over 20 years. It's like we'd always be, and we still do this work of figuring out who's your ideal client, et cetera, what are the problems you're solving, all those things. We go at it a slightly different way, which is, you know, what is the truth really for Jennifer? What's really moving through her, for example, that is wanting to come through? What's the tone of that? And then the sophisticated ways that it activates. And you'll notice, everybody, I use that word, it activates your people who don't even know they're ready for you. And also the people, and we had a conversation about this just last week, like the people that have been like, where the hell have you been all my life? Like, and the voices that are willing to do that, everybody knows this, like they stand out, and they don't have to yell, and you don't have to do booty shots, and you like do it if that's true to you and your brand. Do you know what I mean? But if it's not, don't do it. And it's a wild and deep trust in who you are and what it is. And it also, as you just said, I mean, it's true. What you said is, it does actually take a lot of courage, especially, and I've pivoted, you know, in the last 2 years as well. And, you know, it takes a lot of courage to be like, okay, here's what's really moving through me, and here's what it's really about. And yes, making it meaningful for people, but holding that resonant tone. And so even for those of you that are watching or listening, you know, think about like, what do I really have a taste for in my business and in my life, and what's the tone with which I want to do it. So for me, for example, I had 20 some years in marketing, and it's very formulaic and it's very strategic and it's very bro marketing kind of stuff. And I've trained with some of the biggest people in the world, and I've had a ton of success, truthfully. And I was like, I'm so over it. Like, where's the artistry? Where's the magnetism? Where's the collaboration? I'm not interested in this anymore. I want artistry. And I believe that you can have artistry and strategy and income and iconography all at once. And I've proven it. And so it's like, that's what I have a true taste for. I have a taste for art, like it's all over my house. I live in the tropics. So those are things anyways, as you're listening, everybody, to be like, well, how do I know what I want to say? You do actually, and you can certainly, reach out to someone like myself or Jennifer, or whoever, but, start with those things. And the other thing, I want to just go back to something you said too. It's so interesting because, I'm currently going through menopause, fun times. And it's interesting because I share that because so many women sort of say, as you said earlier, I got to a point where basically I don't give an F what anybody thinks anymore. And I say to them, I get what you're saying, but it's not about like launching into, burning down everything in your life. And so if you're listening, this is about the truth that's coming through me, not caring as much or not plugged into those things, but bringing sophistication to it, as you do so powerfully. It's like, how do I say this in a way where I know who I'm speaking to, right? Because there's things I can say to you and your audience that I can't say to the average person on the street here. And there's things that I can say, to 7-figure business owners that new entrepreneurs just aren't going to understand. That's totally cool. It's up to me to figure that out. So I have to have some sophistication, but I'm still going to be resonant and true in my tone of it and how, the essence of who I am is actually coming through or translating. And that's the thing too of I am a spicy personality. I have always been, but I also want to have sophistication in that. And so that's kind of, I think, the balance around all of these things too. So hopefully if you're listening, everybody, that's, is making some sense, and also giving you, I think, almost like permission. The other thing, you're so good for this too, Jennifer, because you've been doing this for a long time. Like, there has to be those of us that are like the lighthouses who say, like, I'm not going to do it this way anymore. Like, it's just, I don't have a taste for it. Like, thank you. I'm really grateful. I am grateful for the success. I'm grateful for the strategies. I'm grateful for the people that have mentored me and I've learned from. But now I just don't really have a taste for the old manipulation and the old formulated. For me personally, in the marketing and branding and quiz funnel world, I want to do it differently and prove that it works. And I have done that. And you've done it, in your world, you made a pivot and you were like, this is what I want to talk about. And so it is time, and it's important to have groups like this and the groups that you create so we can come together, and give each other courage, right? And encouragement.
Yeah. You said something, well, you're speaking my language anyways. Like, for those of you, when you go to Shasta's quiz funnel, you'll see what I'm saying. It's absolutely stunning. And I've been saying recently that, channeling is my gift, but business is my art. I really love designing businesses. I love looking inside everyone's business and being like, ooh, what did you create? But I view it all as art. I didn't really have words for that. And even I really notice other people's branding. And even though it might not be branding that works for me, it totally works for them. And so I admire that. Anyways, when you're talking about this, yes. And I'm going to say something to you that you don't know I'm going to say to you, obviously, because I haven't said it yet. But I'm sharing this because I'm trying to convey impact to everyone listening, which is that I genuinely believe that those of us that are going to be called to work with you and do things differently are already getting the downloads from the universe, the wherever we're going to say, right? From beyond this planet, of the new templates, right? I believe some of us will be channeling the new body templates. Some of us will be channeling the new money templates. Some of us will be channeling the new business templates and also relationship templates. I should say that as well. And, but we're feeling that. I think when we went into 2020, we were already feeling like, what is this? like, what is this nonsense, right? There was something that wasn't quite feeling aligned anymore. I don't know that it ever felt aligned, but I think as social media gets noisier, it's really about people just trying to find a way to stand out. So they're following the tactics.
Yeah.
They're thinking the TikTok videos are going to get them there. And yes, if you do a great TikTok video and, you know, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't go viral. And if that's in alignment with your archetypes and how you're meant to show up in the world, then that's great. But for those of us that are really the lighthouse, we're more kind of understated, like we're bold and we have opinions, but we're not maybe super flashy or are gregarious in our tone. Like I'm not someone that can hold a really really projected voice for a long period of time. I just physically can't sustain that, right? So either my work has to speak for me or I have to find ways to bring people to me, right? Some people are really great hunters. They can go out and they can go, you know, gardening all day and picking stuff from the garden or farming. But I'm the person that's meant to sit in the castle and have people bring people to me, right? And I know I'm not alone when I say that. So I love that you shared that, but back to the business templates, does that resonate when I share that with you?
Absolutely. You know, a lot of the work that actually is the foundation of Be the Must Have is coming out of what I would call, you know, genius codes. And my husband, Ian, and I have actually been teaching those kind of almost under the table, I call it, for about 2 years. And it's really based so I have as you said in my bio, you know, my background is I'm First Nations and so is my husband. And it's an interesting thing because, and I'm going to answer your question, but it's going to give everybody, I think, a perspective that might be helpful. So so my background is I'm a Cree, Lakota, Métis, and my husband is Algonquin. We're from Canada originally. We live in Mexico now, and so it's interesting because we have a perspective in the way that we teach things is very cyclical, and the way that a lot of First Nations people globally looked at the time that we're in is that it's a shift, right? We're going through a massive shift. So, you know, whether it's called the lighting of the eighth fire, there's all kinds of stories. And basically it's that humans are at a time, and it's the exact time, and it's not just First Nations Canadian, this is global First Nations culture, that there's a shift in consciousness. And literally that new, you know, matrices, I see it as almost like a code, are being birthed from us. And it's a shift, right? It's not like coming ascension model. It's actually coming out of your body. It's like the greatest potency is already inside of you. It's in your body. It's in the earth. These are earth, you know, earth-based energies that have been here for thousands of years. And this isn't to get too like woo-woo or esoteric. And it does actually make sense for everything that we see. So what it means though, stay with me, everybody, is gone through this time where the authority figure is outside of you. You get that, everyone? Like, it's like, whether it's a religious figure that's outside of you, or it's the teacher or mentor that's outside of you, or it's the whomever who's outside of you, even spiritual models, it's all outside of us. We've moved into a time where it's inside of, like, we're awakening to the point that it's already here. We're not getting a new thing, it's already here, we're accessing them. And so back to your question is, many people around all of, you know, things that happen with the pandemic, things that we're seeing around climate change, economic change, all these things, it's like, I believe it's actually this gateway to the genius that's actually inside of all of us, which means that yes, we still will need mentors and helpers and teachers and artists and all of those things, but the model of that has changed. So it's not hierarchical, it's instead, as you said, coming into someone's business and saying to them, here's what I see, what do you see? For example, in the work that we do, we don't come in and say, here's what your brand has to look like, use these shades of blue. It's really about accessing deep levels of genius that already exist in somebody. And it means, here's where things get really dicey and really exciting, is that the old model just, it literally, for me, it's the only word I can use, like, I don't have a taste for it. Like, I literally cannot stand those things anymore. Mm-hmm. I cannot handle it. It means that all of us, yes, are giving an opportunity, are being knocked on the head, so to speak, with what is the genius that you hold. And so There's those of us that are going to hold the prosperity codes, right? The health codes, the whatever it is codes, absolutely. And then you bring it through. And honestly, I mean, it's interesting because no one's ever asked me these questions. I've never actually explained the deepest level of work that we're doing in this company, but that's actually what we do. So even, you know, I had a client that came to us, she's like, oh, I think that, you know, I want to revamp and rebrand my yoga and wellness business. And it turns out when we go really deep into her, or like her truth and her codes, it's like, no, she's actually here to change the paradigm of aging. Like she's holding a deeper genius than she ever thought possible. And then we translate that into business and branding that makes sense. But it's why if you're listening, and I don't, you know, you have felt this, Jennifer, and I would believe there's like thousands of people in your community that feel the same way. Like, it's just like, yeah, it's just, I don't have a taste for it anymore. It just doesn't really work for me. And yet what's scary, I think, is like, well, what's the alternative? You know, if I'm not following the TikTok tactics, then what's the alternative? And the alternative is you have to actually really trust your, you know, what you truly have a taste for and hire the right people, right? I mean, we still hire people, but it's a different model. Absolutely. And it means, again, we get to choose, we get to unleash it all, which is both scary and exhilarating.
Yeah. And with a fully expressed brand, right? The brand can end up doing a lot of the speaking for you, right? When it's done.
Totally.
Again, when you see Shasta and Ian's work, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's just a different, it's a whole other caliber for those of us that are at a certain, I can say this for me, like I get to a level in my business where my tolerance for crappy aesthetics is getting less and less. And it's challenging for me to find something that really captures what I'm trying to convey. Right. And then, but the higher you go up in your income, I find the more challenging it can be to find people that really have the capacity, because I think it's a vibrational capacity to be able to channel, because really that's what you're doing, right? At that level, to really tap in and laser in on the essence, that really expanded essence of a brand. And to your point, yeah, like I think we did this in 2020. Everyone was yelling pivot. Well, most of us didn't have to pivot, but because we were listening to people outside of us, right? I didn't pivot. I know you did, but it was different because it was more like your life that you were shifting, and you kind of packed it all up and moved to Mexico, right? Or started traveling and then moved to Mexico. But I'm a big fan of finding ways to have people sold on you so that they're coming to you and saying, how can I work with you in an ideal world, right? So some of that is brand awareness and marketing and whatever, right? But I don't need to do TikTok reels to attract business. I mean, maybe one day I might, but to me, that just feels like work, and it feels like I kind of need a shower. It does not feel aligned for what I want to create. It's not because of the platform per se. It's really the energetics, right, of what works. And but I think that's where we're in. We've already, but to my point, we've already pivoted, and we're going to keep doing that. That's just something we have to do as CEOs. True CEOs are just going to always have to innovate and tune in and say, okay, what's working, what's not working. We all, and I don't know if you're noticing this, by the way, I've noticed this, that I think that the speed in which we're moving through this awakening is such that the things that worked really well even a year ago, you try to duplicate it, and it's like, why did this fall flat? Like a challenge or a launch, some sort of launch, or I don't know, whatever it is, right? And who knows what that is. But I think we can definitely recognize that the ways in which we've been marketing, the energy behind what we're marketing, and the methodology in which we're doing it is outdated. And we see all of these different tactics appearing on the world stage, or I shouldn't say world stage.
Oh my gosh.
Not on the world stage, but on the, in the business world. And now there's those of us that have been around for a while that are like, okay, but what if we can just download or set the tone for what's happening, instead of constantly reacting to what's appearing in our world.
Well, I mean, the foundation of all of this is that, first it's really about energy mastery, right? It's really about like, what is the deepest gene? I mean, these are the terms that I use. Like, what's the deepest truth and genius that wants to come through me? Then it becomes, what do I actually have a taste and an affiliation to? Like, I like to be on stages. My husband does not. It wouldn't make sense, even though stages are extremely powerful, to force him to be on a stage. Conversely, he's great at networking and going to parties, and I hate it. Like, it's not my jam. And so it's not about like, I think what we've been trying to do for a long time is like force people into tactics. And the truth is, people have had some success around that, but there's a cost to that. There's an energetic cost. There's, truth cost. There's all those things. So for you, if it was you're like, I don't really want to do videos and TikToks, and you force yourself to do it, there's a cost, and you're not going to be magnetic or iconic anyways. But it really comes, this is where I have a lot of disagreement, and my clients ask me this all the time. And it's so funny because they'll be like, well, I'm in this mastermind and so did this like certain thing and they got sensational results. And I say to them point blank, do you want to do that? Like, do you actually have a taste to do that? And does that feel authentic and real? And they'll be like, no, it sounds horrible. I'm like, then why would you force yourself to do it? But underneath it is a basis of fear, and a basis of lack. Let's be honest around all of this. And I get it because of their profound voices and their profound shadows still in our culture, and usually us as individuals. And my shadow is I'm very impatient around things. So I have to be like, it's okay, I can be a farmer, plant the seeds. And yet at the same time, I've also had, as you've had, like an instantaneous portal opens up and people can come into my life and come in like you did, and amazing things can unfold. And that's really energy mastery. But then it becomes energy mastery to say, what are the 3D or the masculine, meaning the containers that I'm going to flow my genius through. So clearly you're good at audio stuff. You're a master podcaster. You have a massive company around it. I would be like that, clearly we know that's your genius. So everyone who's listening, it's not about not using the tactic. It's not about I sit on my meditation cushion and create vision boards for the rest of my life and hope that fairies drop shit off at my door. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about really going into a deep place of like, what really, really is your energetic mastery, the tone that you want to put out in the world, and the way that we can do it for you. And so then, as you said, it does actually a lot of the heavy lifting. Does branding matter? Of course, branding matters. Does your lead magnets matter? Of course they matter, but they don't matter in the way that we've been thinking they matter, which is all this manipulation. It's really, when people work with us, we want people, as soon as they come into your world, or even there, we're helping a huge leader right now go through a massive company change. And, that's another big area is change management. How do I start talking about things that I haven't talked about? As soon as someone comes in your world though, or they're already in your world, is as soon as that point of contact happens, whether it's visual, audio, in person, is we want them to get a taste of who you are, and to have that taste activate them. And I use that term, not sell them. They're going to be activated. You don't have to sell them. They're activated. They're like, who the hell's this Jennifer person? Like, they binge all your stuff, they buy from you, they tell people about you, they interact with you. And the truth is that there's so many people that want that and are waiting for us to show ourselves to them. And the more, again, that we can hold the energetic mastery, we hold the place of the iconic truth of who we are, we share our genius in ways that are meaningful for us, then literally it's like a portal opens up. And it's the same, you don't have to, yes, we want to take actions in our business. I love taking action I love doing stuff like this, and I'm even willing to do some of the things I don't totally love, but I know I have somewhat of a taste for. And the other stuff, if it comes to networking and stuff, like I'll figure out a solution, another portal will open. But I think it's the shift anyways, back to what you said. We've been looking at marketing branding, lead generation as like, oh, I have to roll up my sleeves and get this done, and I have to figure it out. And there's literally 5,000 so-called experts in the world. And I've probably studied with most of them, as probably you have too. And then I finally was like, I'm literally detoxifying all this out of my system. I'm grateful, but I'm detoxifying. And there's a new way, and I know it works and people are hungry for it. And it's based in truth and genius. And then the sophisticated resonant channels. And it's the same way, like you came in, you saw our icon quiz funnel and you were like, holy shit, who is this woman? Right? Because it activated you. Something instantly resonated, meaning, and think about the term resonate, everybody. You have a harmonic vibrational relationship. You're like, whoa. And I got to find out more. And that's what we do. We don't create manipulative branding. We don't create flat quiz funnels, just get you 10,000 leads and no sales. Like, who cares? We want people to come into your world and be like, who the hell is this person? And that doesn't come, friends, by being formulaic. And it doesn't come from following every other so-called master marketer, but it doesn't mean you won't do some of their tactics, right? We still have email funnels and they work really well, but I tend to write them based on what's truly needed and wanted for whoever the client is that we're working with, for example. So it's not about throwing everything out, but as you said, it's a different perspective. And we're all hungry for it anyways. I mean, if you're feeling like your business is kind of running you and you feel bored, I mean, that's how I felt before we started doing things this way. I was like, I'm just kind of bored. Like, I'm just kind of tired of doing the same shit day after day, even though I was very financially successful. I wanted more. And I was like, what's the truth of this? The truth is there's ways of actually being artistic and resonant and your gorgeous self that actually is really, really meaningful for people who are already in your world and waiting for you, like where are you kind of thing. So go for it, everybody.
Yeah. I will say, hopefully it's obvious to everyone listening why you were able to create so many multi-7-figure and higher businesses, and why you're working with people at a certain level, because this is exactly it, right? There's an element of getting into our zone of genius and really making sure that essence spreads everywhere, right? Otherwise, we're working harder than we need to. We're throwing money at problems, meaning, oh, I thought that marketing tactic worked for everyone. It didn't work for me. And then throwing money at the next one and all of the various things, right? Obviously, you're more than a marketing agency. You're more than a branding agency. There's a movement happening through you, and there's activations happening through you. And I say that because even this is new information for all of you. We're going to be rebranding Soul Journeys pretty significantly, I would say. And, but one of the things we're moving towards is more spiritual luxury, because that's just what I'm being called to do. I'm not going to go into the story about that now, but I happened to just mention that to Shasta in passing. Like, I wasn't even trying to get anything. We were just kind of, bouncing, we're just chatting, and you designed something really quickly and sent it through that said spiritual luxury, just for me to plug in, and it was activated, right? Like, I could feel the energy coming off that. I knew that you intentionally infused it with these codes, and I felt it, which also explains why when I saw you and I have been kind of playing footsie on Facebook for a long time, and we have a lot of the same connections. But when I saw this post, right, with your quiz, I was like, holy crap. And I want to say, like, it's obviously more than a quiz, but the reason why we're talking about the quiz in particular right now is because that's a great starting point. And quizzes are so high, they're such high performing lead magnets when done well. And there's many that aren't. And honestly, having created a few quizzes over the years, even with my background in psychology and various things, like there are some nuances in quiz design that I would say probably 99% of people wouldn't be able to capture if they did it on their own. It's not to say that we're not bright. It's just to say that we all have our zone of genius. And I think it's a very particular, because it's more than the psychology, and it's more than the branding, and it's more than whatever. It's kind of a mixture of all of that, plus understanding how people buy and how people think, and how to write it in a way that it equally showcases you as the icon, but also has a conversion vibe to it, that whatever is put together, it has a way of, again, having people, just based on the conversations you and I've had, right? These quizzes that you're designing are selling people into. They might be selling people away too, which is also a good thing, right? But if someone's going to buy from you, there's something about these quizzes that Shasta and her husband and her team are developing that are a different kind of thing. So if you're realizing it's time to check a lot of boxes, I mean, I just think quizzes, they're such an efficient way to do a lot of things very quickly, right? And I'm all about efficiency and simple elegance, as we kind of talked about, right? So you get to build your list more, you get to build a relationship with these new people coming into your community, you get to showcase yourself as the shit, right? You get to create copy and so on in a way that converts people into whatever it is that's actually going to serve them, because it's all from a place of high service, and really stand out in a very noisy marketplace, so to speak, right? Not that there's not room for us, but that's the whole point. Like, why bother swimming with all the fish in the fishbowl when you can just totally jump out and go and be in the ocean, kind of thing, right? So
I think, I mean, honestly, you know, and this isn't a sales tactic, that I see people and they don't have a good quiz or even like a calculator. So even if you're in a service-based business, so my husband and I also have a luxury property management company here in Mexico. We have a calculator basically on our website. So whether it's like a calculator, assessment tool, or a quiz, it's the #1 lead capture tool, everybody. So you should have a lead capture on your website and not just a downloadable PDF, because it's all the data is there, so people are saturated on that. Unless it's a really, really, really good checklist or some sort of downloadable PDF, then people kind of But quizzes, calculators, assessment tools, extremely valuable lead capture, and then lead generation, which means that when you go to, whether you're doing organic or paid content or paid traffic ads, quizzes are absolutely converting at the lowest number in lead generation, in conversion ads on Facebook and things like Google ads and things like that. So the cost that you're actually investing to put out a lead magnet, say on a PDF, versus a lead magnet that's a quiz, is significantly lower using a quiz. They just convert much higher. But that's not where we want to stop, right? And this is where, when you look at a lot of how the big dogs are talking about quizzes, that's where they go, oh my God, yes. And it's true. And I know, because I hired one many years ago and we got like 20,000 leads. Like, it was insane in like a week. And I'm telling you, like, one sale. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, why did we do all this work? So I've realized, and this is what led me to actually start really doing this, as well as, you know, all my experience, and my husband has a background in engineering and construction. So you have these two minds that really think a specific way. But quizzes, when you build out a quiz, as you said, you're actually taking people through an experience. And one of the things that we know coming out of the pandemic is experiences matter more to people than ever. So even as you're listening, friends, think about what's your customer journey, what's your customer experience when there's a touch point with you and your brand. Because with a quiz is we can bring someone, it's like welcoming them into your home, right? And you're showing them this gorgeous home you have, but you're not just doing that, you're actually getting them insight about themselves. And the quizzes that we build actually give people really high value. So we don't just do like a BuzzFeed quiz, and we won't even take on clients if we know we can't help them basically 2.5 times their like immediate return on investment. So everything is set up so that we take, you know, let's say cold leads or even warm through an experience like a labyrinth. They get an immediate result, but they're getting a taste of who you are. And I'm talking like a very specific, who is this person? I feel totally like seen. I mean, the biggest compliment I get is when someone takes our quiz and they're like, whoa, it's like you totally read my mind. It's like, and that's what we do for our clients. And our clients are always like, holy shit, people have said like, the quiz that you created for us is bang on. Like, people take it and they're like, whoa, it's like you're reading my mind. And we know that as soon as we feel like someone gets us, we're going to also take the next step with them. And then what we do, which very few people do, is we develop very, luscious, gorgeous, and highly convert. They convert really high, basically reports. and always call to action. But it doesn't have to be this weirdo marketing manipulative stuff. It's literally like, here's your, whatever your thing is, whether it's again, a calculator assessment or quiz archetype or quiz type. And then you build out these really specific offers for those people. And it's, when I look at businesses, I have to tell you, like, I almost cringe when I go, oh my God, like they really should be having quiz funnel or a lead, like a lead capture, because the amount of business that's coming in for people with our quizzes is amazing. I mean, it's almost insane. And even things when I go to someone's website, they don't have good lead capture. Like, think of all the relationship capital you're losing, you know, the influence capital, not to mention the actual income. So even if you're listing and you're like, well, I'm a lawyer, or I have a more service-based business, like maybe even like a branding business, you know, having a calculator where you're giving people evaluation is just the way to go. So hopefully that's some things for everyone listening to think about. But it is, to your point, and please learn from my mistake, that I think over my 20 years, I hired 3 different people to develop quizzes, and they were all massive flops, extremely high investment, extremely frustrating process. And you really do need the right, you really do need the right person that brings a lot of components together, so that it's not just lead generation, it's loyalty, and it's also customer journey and sales. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. As we wrap up for today, I will just remind everyone that your website is bethemusthave.com. And if you go to bethemusthave.com/winning quiz, and we're going to put that in the show notes, you'll be able to take the quiz and find out, more about you and your brand and so on, but also to see the process. And I will say that as we wrap up, there's so much more we could talk about, Shasta, but I will say that when you get to a certain level in business, you can work with someone who you're their first 7-figure client that they've worked with, right? And you're the testing ground. But I think most of us, when we get to a certain level of business, we want to work with people that are top in their industry, but also who know how to speak our language, right? Someone that knows someone who's running a business that's making $2,000 a month is very different than someone that is running a full, conglomerate, basically, like you and your husband, right? With all the different businesses and so on. It's just different. It's a different language. And so, all things being equal, why wouldn't we give ourselves the opportunity to step into that? Yeah. So, well, thank you. I mean, we could talk about way more. I know this isn't the end of our conversations, because we're going to be talking about this way more. And of course, when we go through a bit more rebranding, then all of you will be able to see whatever quiz we're going to create together, and you'll be able to take it and so on. So, Shasta, thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing your genius, and thanks to all of you for being here. Let us know what you're taking away. Let us know what your ahas are. Be sure to reach out to Shasta, and we will see you again next time. Bye for now.